It all began on a crisp morning when the townspeople of the small, tight-knit community gathered for their usual routines. The air was filled with the sound of birds chirping, and the church bell had just rung, signaling the start of the day. However, as the first parishioners arrived at the church, they noticed something unusual. Right outside the churchyard, the ground had caved in, leaving a gaping hole that seemed to stretch endlessly into the earth. The sight was surreal. It wasn't just any hole. It had an eerie, almost perfect circular shape, as though it had been deliberately carved out of the ground. The edges were unnaturally smooth, and the depth was impossible to gauge with the naked eye. It was as if the earth had been swallowed by some unseen force. People gathered around, whispering and speculating. Some believed it to be the result of a sinkhole, a natural occurrence, while others argued that it looked too precise for nature to be the cause. One elderly man claimed he had heard a deep rumbling sound the night before, but no one else could recall anything unusual. The ground had shown no prior signs of instability. There had been no tremors, no cracking. This only added to the mystery. The church, a building that had stood for over 2 centuries, remained untouched, standing tall as though protecting itself from whatever had happened. Soon, word spread like wildfire, and the curious began to arrive from nearby towns. The local authorities cordoned off the area, but the sheer size of the hole made it impossible to keep everyone at bay. Crowds gathered, murmuring about everything from geological phenomena to supernatural intervention. Some claimed it was a sign from above, a warning or perhaps a miracle, while others dismissed such notions as superstition. The local priest stood at the edge of the crowd, his face pale and drawn. He couldn't help but feel uneasy, as though the hole represented something far more significant than a geological anomaly. The church was more than just a place of worship. It was the heart of the community. For something so strange to happen right outside its doors seemed like an omen. As the day wore on, the mystery only deepened. No one could determine how deep the hole was. Rocks tossed into it didn't make a sound, and even flashlights couldn't illuminate its bottom. It was as if the void swallowed everything: light, sound, and reason. Scientists and geologists from the nearest university were called in to assess the situation. They set up equipment and began their initial investigations, but even the experts seemed baffled by what they were witnessing. When the first exploration team arrived, the atmosphere was tense with anticipation. A small group of specialists, equipped with safety gear and high-tech instruments, prepared to descend into the hole. Cameras were mounted on cables and lowered first, their live feed displayed on monitors for the gathered crowd to see. People craned their necks to catch a glimpse, hoping for answers. As the camera descended, the crowd watched in hushed silence. At first, the footage showed nothing but the dark, uneven walls of the hole. The descent continued for what felt like an eternity, but the camera still hadn't reached the bottom. Then something unexpected happened. The camera's light illuminated a vast, open space, a cavern hidden beneath the surface. The crowd gasped as the screen displayed what appeared to be a massive underground chamber. The cavern was larger than anyone had anticipated, with walls that shimmered faintly as though embedded with minerals. But it wasn't just the size of the cavern that left everyone stunned. Strange patterns were etched into the walls, markings that looked deliberate and ancient. The specialists exchanged uneasy glances. It was clear that this was no ordinary sinkhole. The cavern appeared untouched by human hands, yet the carvings suggested otherwise. As the camera panned across the cavern, it caught sight of objects scattered on the ground: shards of pottery, metallic fragments, and what looked like remnants of tools. The air was thick with tension as the crowd realized that this wasn't just a geological discovery. It was something far more profound. The lead geologist stepped forward to address the crowd, his voice steady, but his expression betraying his unease. "What we're seeing here is extraordinary," he said. "This cavern has likely been hidden for thousands of years, untouched by modern civilization. These markings, these artifacts, they could be evidence of a previously unknown culture." The revelation sent a ripple of excitement and fear through the crowd. People began to whisper frantically, their imaginations running wild. What kind of civilization could have lived beneath their feet? How had the cavern remained undiscovered for so long? And why had the hole appeared now, of all times? As the sun set, the exploration team prepared to go deeper into the cavern. They lowered more equipment, determined to uncover the secrets hidden within. But as they worked, a strange sensation settled over the area. It was as though the earth itself was watching, waiting. For those who stood at the edge of the hole, gazing into the abyss, one thing was clear. This was only the beginning of a mystery that would challenge everything they thought they knew. As the exploration of the mysterious underground cavern progressed, a team of archaeologists and historians was brought in to examine the artifacts discovered at the site. The initial analysis of the shards and fragments revealed materials that were completely unfamiliar to the experts. Some appeared to be ancient pottery, their surfaces intricately decorated with patterns that didn't match any known style from the region. Others were metallic objects, weathered and corroded but still retaining faint traces of craftsmanship, evidence that whoever created them possessed advanced knowledge for their time. The excavation team worked tirelessly, carefully documenting and retrieving each item. Among the most intriguing finds were a series of stone tablets, partially buried under layers of sediment. The tablets were inscribed with strange symbols and geometric shapes, unlike any known language. Their arrangement suggested they held meaning, but no one could decipher them immediately. Linguists and cryptographers were called in, and the tablets were transported to a temporary research lab set up near the site. The deeper the team delved into the cavern, the more perplexing the discoveries became. In one corner of the cavern, archaeologists uncovered what appeared to be an altar. The structure was carved from a single massive block of stone and bore similar symbols to those on the tablets. The altar was surrounded by small, hollowed-out depressions, each containing charred remnants of an unknown substance. This suggested that rituals or ceremonies might have been performed here, adding a sense of mysticism to the find. But the discoveries didn't stop there. Near the altar, the team stumbled upon a set of tools and instruments that defied explanation. Among them was a long, cylindrical object made of a material that resembled metal, but felt unnaturally light to the touch. When tested, it exhibited properties that couldn't be replicated with modern materials. There was also a disc-like object with engravings along its edges, which some speculated could have been a form of currency, a ceremonial token, or even a navigational tool. The artifacts weren't the only thing that baffled the team. The cavern walls were covered with more of the enigmatic symbols, forming intricate patterns that seemed almost purposeful. Some sections glowed faintly under certain light conditions, leading scientists to wonder if the markings contained a type of luminescent mineral or had been treated with a substance unknown to modern science. The carvings also hinted at a possible connection to celestial events, with some patterns resembling star maps or constellations. As the team pieced together these findings, a narrative began to emerge, though it raised more questions than answers. The artifacts and carvings suggested the presence of a sophisticated civilization, one that might have thrived in the area long before recorded history. This civilization appeared to possess advanced knowledge of metallurgy, astronomy, and possibly even spiritual practices. But who were they? And why had they vanished without a trace, leaving only these cryptic remnants behind? The discoveries sent shockwaves through the scientific and academic communities. Scholars from across the world flocked to the site, each hoping to contribute to the unraveling of the mystery. The local community, however, was torn between fascination and fear. Some viewed the artifacts as a blessing, proof of their town's historical significance. Others saw them as a curse, a reminder that they were treading on sacred or forbidden ground. The tension reached a breaking point when one of the workers uncovered what appeared to be a sealed chamber within the cavern. The chamber's entrance was marked by a large stone slab, engraved with a particularly elaborate set of symbols. The markings seemed to warn against opening the chamber, but curiosity got the better of the team. After hours of careful excavation, the slab was finally removed, revealing a dark, narrow passageway leading further into the earth. Inside the chamber, the air was thick and stale, untouched for millennia. The walls were lined with shelves carved directly into the rock, each holding rows of small, intricately carved figurines. The figurines depicted human-like figures, but with elongated features and exaggerated proportions. Some held objects resembling tools or weapons, while others were posed as if in prayer or supplication. At the center of the chamber was another altar, larger and more elaborate than the one outside. This one bore a striking engraving of an eye, surrounded by radiating lines that seemed to suggest light or energy. The discovery of the sealed chamber deepened the sense of unease among the team. Some began to whisper about the possibility of curses or supernatural forces, drawing parallels to stories of ancient tombs and the dangers of disturbing sacred sites. Others dismissed these fears, insisting that the finds were purely historical and should be studied without hesitation. Despite their differing perspectives, everyone agreed on one thing: the artifacts and structures were unlike anything ever discovered. The deeper they went into the cavern's mysteries, the more they realized they were standing on the brink of a revelation that could rewrite history. Yet, as they prepared to continue their exploration, an unshakable feeling lingered in the air, a sense that they were not alone in the depths of the earth, and that the past they were unearthing might not be entirely at rest. As the excavations continued, a strange atmosphere began to settle over the site. At first, it was easy to dismiss the faint sounds, the flickering lights, the uneasy feelings as mere coincidences or tricks of the imagination. But soon the occurrences became too frequent and too unsettling to ignore. It started with the sounds. Late at night, when most of the workers had gone home and the site was quiet, low, resonant noises could be heard emanating from the cavern. They were unlike anything the team had ever encountered. Deep, rhythmic vibrations that seemed to echo through the walls and resonate in the chest. At first, the scientists thought it might be an underground river or shifting geological formations, but seismological equipment detected no movement. The sounds came and went, defying any logical explanation. Then there were the lights. Workers began reporting faint flickering glows in the cavern's depths. These weren't caused by the equipment or any natural luminescence. Instead, the lights seemed to pulse and shift, almost like will-o'-the-wisps disappearing the moment someone tried to get closer. Video recordings captured fleeting glimpses of these phenomena, but the footage was inconclusive, just faint orbs of light, hovering momentarily before vanishing into the darkness. By now, whispers of the supernatural had spread among the workers. Some claimed the cavern was haunted, that the spirits of the ancient civilization were angry about the intrusion. Others believed the symbols and artifacts were imbued with a kind of energy, a remnant of rituals performed long ago. The altar, in particular, became a focal point of these speculations. Workers swore they felt an invisible force when standing near it, as though the air itself grew heavier and harder to breathe. The local community began to echo these fears. Some residents reported strange dreams after visiting the site, vivid visions of the symbols carved into the walls and the figurines discovered in the chamber. Others claimed to hear the same low, resonant sounds that echoed in the cavern, even from their homes. A sense of dread began to spread, as though the whole had unleashed something that couldn't be contained. The exploration team tried to maintain a rational perspective, but even the most skeptical among them couldn't entirely ignore the unease. Equipment failures became more frequent. Cameras would short out, sensors would give erratic readings, and communication devices would pick up bursts of static. A geologist who had been working near the sealed chamber reported feeling a sudden wave of nausea and dizziness, forcing him to leave the site. When examined by a doctor, he was found to be in perfect health, but he refused to return, convinced that something in the cavern was responsible. The eerie phenomena escalated when one of the team members, an experienced archaeologist, claimed to have seen movement in the shadows. He had been cataloging artifacts near the altar when he noticed what he described as a figure, tall and indistinct, standing at the edge of the light. Thinking it was another team member, he called out, but the figure didn't respond. When he approached, the figure dissolved into the shadows, leaving him shaken. Others dismissed it as a trick of the light, but the archaeologist was adamant about what he had seen. The most chilling incident occurred during an overnight survey of the cavern. A small group of researchers was using ground-penetrating radar to map the area when they suddenly lost contact with the surface. Radios went silent, and their flashlights began to flicker. For nearly an hour, the team was unreachable, leaving those above ground in a state of panic. When communication was finally restored, the researchers were found huddled near the altar, visibly shaken. They claimed to have heard whispers, indistinct but persistent, coming from the walls of the cavern. None of them could explain what had happened, but all of them refused to return to the site after that night. The strange occurrences were no longer confined to the cavern. Residents of the nearby town began to report unusual activity as well. Some described hearing the same deep vibrations in the middle of the night, while others spoke of shadows moving unnaturally in their homes. A few even claimed to see figures similar to those carved into the figurines, elongated and otherworldly, standing at the edge of their vision, only to vanish when they turned to look. Local religious leaders became involved, urging the community to avoid the site and treat it with respect. The priest of the church, who had been skeptical at first, began to believe that the hole was more than just a geological anomaly. He organized prayer gatherings and blessings, hoping to ward off whatever malevolent force seemed to be emanating from the cavern. Despite his efforts, the unease only grew. News of the supernatural events spread beyond the town, attracting a new wave of visitors, paranormal investigators, spiritualists, and thrill-seekers eager to experience the phenomenon for themselves. Some claimed to sense powerful energies at the site, while others brought specialized equipment to detect electromagnetic anomalies. Their findings were inconclusive, but many left the site convinced that something otherworldly was at play. The scientific team, now deeply divided, faced a difficult decision. Some argued for halting the excavation, fearing that they were tampering with forces they didn't understand. Others insisted on continuing, believing that the cavern held answers to questions about humanity's past, and possibly its future. But as the phenomena grew more intense, even the most determined researchers began to question whether they were in over their heads. By now, the cavern had taken on an almost mythical status, a place where science, history, and the supernatural collided. The hole outside the church was no longer just a physical anomaly. It had become a symbol of the unknown, a reminder that there are still mysteries in the world that defy explanation. Yet for all their investigations, the team was no closer to understanding the true nature of the cavern, or the strange events that seemed to follow in its wake. And for the community, the question remained: had they uncovered a relic of the past, or had they disturbed something that was meant to stay buried forever? The excavation reached its most dramatic turning point when the team made an astonishing breakthrough. For weeks, the researchers had been working to decipher the symbols etched into the walls of the cavern and the stone tablets recovered from the sealed chamber. Their work was slow and methodical, involving linguists, cryptographers, and historians. Finally, a breakthrough came when a linguist identified similarities between the symbols and an ancient proto-language thought to have died out thousands of years ago. The markings on the tablets revealed a fragmented but chilling message. Pieced together, it read, "Guardians of the depths, do not awaken what lies below." The warning was accompanied by intricate depictions of humanoid figures bowing before a massive, otherworldly entity that seemed to emerge from the ground. The image was unsettling. Tentacle-like appendages radiated from a central mass, and the entity's face was depicted as a hollow void, surrounded by jagged lines that suggested movement or energy. The discovery sent shockwaves through the team. Some dismissed the carvings as mythological, arguing that they were symbolic representations of the civilization's beliefs or rituals, but others weren't so sure. The warning, coupled with the strange occurrences at the site, felt too specific to ignore. The sense of foreboding deepened as the linguist found additional references to cycles of awakening and a cryptic phrase that translated roughly to, "When the earth trembles, the boundary weakens." The next phase of the excavation brought even more startling revelations. Ground-penetrating radar revealed a massive structure buried even deeper beneath the cavern. It was shaped like a pyramid but inverted, its apex pointing downward into the earth. The structure was unlike anything the team had ever seen. Its proportions and symmetry defied natural formations, and its surface reflected radar signals in ways that suggested a material unknown to modern science. The decision to excavate further wasn't unanimous. Many on the team, including the local priest, urged caution. They argued that the warnings in the carvings should be taken seriously, especially given the unexplained phenomena already linked to the site. But the allure of discovery was too strong for others to resist. With funding pouring in from universities and private investors eager to unlock the mysteries of the site, the excavation moved forward. As they dug deeper, the ground around the hole began to show signs of instability. Minor tremors were felt in the area, though seismologists insisted there was no indication of tectonic activity. Equipment failures became more frequent, and the eerie sounds that had plagued the site seemed to grow louder, as though something below was stirring. Finally, the excavation team broke through to the top of the inverted structure. The surface was smooth and cold to the touch, with a metallic sheen that seemed to shift in the light. At its center was a circular hatch, engraved with the same symbols found throughout the cavern. The hatch was sealed tight, with no visible means of opening it, but as the team examined it, a faint vibration emanated from the structure, as though it was responding to their presence. What happened next would become the stuff of legend. As the team debated their next steps, the ground began to tremble violently. Dust and debris fell from the cavern ceiling, and the air was filled with a low, guttural sound that seemed to come from deep within the structure. The vibrations intensified, causing equipment to malfunction and lights to flicker erratically. Panicked, the team scrambled to evacuate, but before they could retreat, the hatch began to move. Without warning, the circular hatch rotated, releasing a sound that was both mechanical and organic, like the groan of a living creature. A blinding light poured out from the opening, illuminating the entire cavern. Those who were present described an overwhelming sensation of heat and pressure, as though the air itself had become charged with energy. Some reported seeing shadows moving within the light, shapes that defied explanation. Then, as suddenly as it began, the light vanished. The hatch sealed itself shut, and the cavern fell silent. The tremors stopped, and the air grew still. When the team regrouped outside the cavern, many were too shaken to speak. Some were injured in the chaos, but miraculously there were no fatalities. However, those who had been closest to the hatch began to exhibit strange symptoms. They complained of vivid nightmares, hearing whispers in an unknown language, and feeling as though they were being watched. The incident forced the authorities to step in. The site was declared off-limits, and a team of military personnel arrived to secure the area. The official explanation was that the excavation had triggered a natural gas release, causing hallucinations and instability. But those who had been there knew better. They couldn't shake the feeling that they had disturbed something ancient, something that was never meant to be awakened. In the weeks that followed, the town experienced a series of unusual events. Animals behaved erratically, and residents reported seeing strange lights in the sky. Some claimed that the shadows near the churchyard moved on their own, flickering as though alive. The church itself became a focal point of unease, its once comforting presence now overshadowed by the events outside its doors. The artifacts recovered from the site were quietly taken away by government officials, and all further excavation was halted. Researchers who had worked on the project were sworn to secrecy, but rumors leaked out. Stories of the inverted structure, the carvings, and the light that defied explanation. Some believed the site held evidence of extraterrestrial life, while others insisted it was connected to ancient gods or interdimensional beings. For the townspeople, life slowly returned to normal, though the hole remained a constant reminder of what had happened. It was filled in and covered, but no one dared to build on the land. The church continued to stand, its foundation seemingly untouched by the events around it. But those who had witnessed the discovery couldn't forget the feeling of standing on the edge of something vast and incomprehensible. To this day, the events surrounding the hole remain a mystery. Whether the warnings in the carvings were a relic of ancient superstition or a genuine plea from the past, one thing is certain. Some mysteries are best left buried. Whatever lies beneath the earth, guarded, dormant, or merely waiting, continues to defy explanation, a chilling reminder that humanity's understanding of the world is far from complete.